Between 1958 and 1985, American soda companies launched, reformulated, and killed more brands than most people ever knew existed. Some vanished overnight when the government banned their sweeteners. Others were quietly murdered by their own parent companies. Here are 30 discontinued soda brands from the 70s that need to come back. TAB was the diet soda that survived everything and still lost. Coca-Cola launched it in 1963, sweetened with a blend of cyclamate and saccharine. The name came from an IBM 1401 computer the size of an armoire, which spit out 185,000 four-letter words. Marketers picked the name Tab, then styled it Tabby for the can. When the FDA banned cyclamate in 1969, Coca-Cola switched to saccharin alone, and then Congress slapped saccharin with a cancer warning label. TAB carried that warning for years, right on the can, like a pack of cigarettes. It did not matter. By 1982, TAB was still the top Diet Cola in America. Then, Coca-Cola released Diet Coke and began starving its own creation of advertising and shelf space. By 2011, the company produced 3 million cases of TAB against 885 million of Diet Coke. They killed it in 2020. Teem arrived in 1960 as Pepsi's first shot at the lemon-lime market, and for 2 solid decades it held its own against Sprite and 7-Up. The project started under the codename Duet until a trademark conflict with a margarine brand forced the switch. On April 10, 1959, 3 Pepsi reps converged on St. Joseph, Missouri for the very first public taste test, and 72 hours later, newspaper ads were running across the region. Teem shipped in emerald green bottles with a cross-swirl design, and the green and yellow packaging screamed citrus from across the aisle. By the early 80s, though, sales had thinned. Pepsi pulled the plug in 1984. Replacing Teem with Slice. The brand still exists in Nigeria, Brazil, and Nepal, but in America it has been gone for over 40 years. If you grew up watching MASH reruns, you already knew Nehi grape before you ever tasted it. Radar O'Reilly clutched those bottles like a security blanket, and for millions of American kids, the deep purple soda became inseparable from the character. Nehi came out of Union Bottle Works in Columbus, Georgia in 1924. The bottle stood 12 inches tall, towering over the competition, which is exactly where the name came from. The Nehi Corporation eventually became the Royal Crown Company, launching RC Cola and Diet Rite along the way. During the 70s, at diners and soda fountains, Nehi grape was a staple, candy sweet, impossibly purple, and beloved by every kid who could reach the vending machine. But Fanta and Welch's muscled into the grape market with national distribution Nehi could not match. And by the late 70s, the bottles were hard to find outside certain southern and midwestern pockets. Diet Rite did not just compete in the diet soda wars, it started them. Royal Crown Cola released it in 1958, making it the first sugar-free cola ever sold to the general public. The formula blended cyclamate and saccharin, and after trials in Chicago and North Carolina, Royal Crown pushed it nationwide in 1962. Within months, Diet Rite was the 4th best-selling soda in the country, behind only Coca-Cola, Pepsi, and Royal Crown Cola itself. That terrified the sugar industry. Lobbyists funded studies targeting cyclamate, and in 1969, the FDA banned the sweetener based on rat studies. Results later found to be rodent-specific. The entire diet soda category crashed from 20% of the market to 3%. Royal Crown reformulated with saccharin, then aspartame, then sucralose. 4 sweetener changes across 4 decades, each one alienating loyal drinkers who said the taste had changed. The brand that invented the category watched from the sidelines as Diet Coke took the crown. Before the grapefruit craze of the 21st century, Canada Dry had already tried it. and walked away. Wink hit shelves in 1965, billed as the sassy one, with a jingle that burrowed into your skull for decades. Canada Dry even created a mascot called the Wink Gink, a cartoonish creature that showed up on inflatables handed out by company reps. At the 1964 New York World's Fair, visitors stood in long lines just to try it, the jingle looping on repeat overhead. Early cans were solid steel, and you punctured them with a church key. No pull tabs, no pop tops. Wink tasted sharper and more tart than anything else on the shelf, a grown-up soda that grandparents bought when the grandkids came to stay. By 1975, the ads stopped cold. The drink retreated to a few bottlers in Pennsylvania and the Carolinas, where die-hard fans still hunt it down. Kayo was a chocolate soda named after a comic strip character, invented by a Russian immigrant and sold to kids walking home from school. Aaron D. Pashkow, known as Doc, studied at the Armour Institute of Chicago and cracked a formula no one else had, a chocolate syrup that blended with skim milk or soda water without curdling. He launched Kayo in 1929 and named it after the scrappy kid brother in the Chicago Tribune strip Moon Mullins, a nod to the boxing term for a knockout. Throughout the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s, Kayo showed up at corner stores and gas stations in glass bottles, with the cartoon character grinning on the label. It tasted like fizzy chocolate milk with a malted edge. But Kayo was regional, never national, and Yoo-hoo ate into its territory with wider distribution. Pashkow died in 1986. The Kayo name survives only as a powdered cocoa mix sold by Smucker Food Service. Pepsi's very first Diet Cola did not carry the Pepsi name at all. In 1963, the company launched Patio Diet Cola, fronted by fitness promoter Debbie Drake, with the tagline, "The delicious, refreshing way to stay slim." Pepsi was terrified of tying its flagship brand to a diet product that might taste chemical, so they buried it under a separate label. Within a year, the brand confusion was costing them sales. In 1964, Patio Diet Cola became Diet Pepsi. But the rest of the Patio line, orange, grape, and root beer, rolled on through the early 70s, sold by regional bottlers under the slogan, "Once you and Patio have met, you will know which drink has the brightest flavor yet." On-tap root beer replaced the Patio version in 1977. By decade's end, the Patio name had vanished completely. Aspen soda lasted exactly 4 years and left behind fans who never got over it. PepsiCo launched it in 1978 as a clear, apple-flavored drink, the first attempt by a major brand to crack the citrus and cola stranglehold with fruit. The ads featured Patrick Wayne, John Wayne's son, in white winter gear on horseback, sipping Aspen against snow-covered peaks, while a folksy jingle made the whole thing feel like a cologne ad that accidentally included a beverage. The tagline promised just a snap of apple. By 1979, PepsiCo was pushing buy one, get one deals on 2-liter bottles, and marketing teams in Southern California went door to door, hanging bags with free samples on every doorknob. Americans preferred citrus. Aspen died in 1982. Pepsi tried again with Apple Slice in 1984. The same result. No major soda company has cracked Apple since. Pepsi Light appeared in the mid-70s with one clever trick. Lemon flavor was blended into a Diet Cola to mask the metallic aftertaste of saccharine. Every diet soda of the era used saccharine, and every one of them left a bitter chemical finish that casual drinkers hated. Pepsi's solution was simple: hide it behind citrus. The result tasted genuinely different, a Diet Cola with an actual lemon kick rather than a vaguely sweet chemical imitation. Around 1979, the formula shifted to a 1-calorie blend, but the lemon stayed. The problem was aspartame. When the new sweetener hit the market in the early 80s, saccarine's aftertaste, the very reason Pepsi Light existed, stopped being a problem. Diet Pepsi no longer needed the lemon crutch. Pepsi dropped it, and Pepsi Light was phased out without ceremony. Upper 10 was the lemon-lime soda that got sacrificed in a corporate merger nobody outside the beverage industry ever heard about. The Nehi Corporation launched it in 1933 as a caffeine-free citrus drink, and it held a loyal audience for nearly 7 decades, especially among parents who wanted something fizzy for the kids without the caffeine jolt of a cola. The Royal Crown Company expanded it into Cherry Splash, Orange Squeeze, Cranberry Twist, and Tropical Breeze, giving it a flavor range that Sprite and 7-Up never tried to match. Through the 60s and the 70s, you could find Upper 10 in vending machines at bowling alleys, skating rinks, and small-town groceries across the South and Midwest. Then, Cadbury Schweppes bought the portfolio and noticed they already owned 7-Up. 2 lemon-lime brands in one stable made no sense. Upper 10 was pulled from the American market. No announcement, no farewell, just gone. In 1978, the world's largest beer company tried to sell a soda that foamed, and America went berserk. Anheuser-Busch launched Chelsea as the not-so-soft drink, a citrus-flavored, lightly carbonated beverage with less than 1% alcohol. It came in a silver can stamped with the Anheuser-Busch name and a clear glass bottle that could pass for a Miller High Life from 10 feet away. Critics called it baby beer. Nurses organized protests. Parent groups demanded it be pulled. By October, Anheuser-Busch suspended all advertising and scrambled to reformulate, stripping out the alcohol, switching to a green bottle, dropping its own name from the label, and replacing the tagline with the far tamer, the natural alternative. The neutered Chelsea returned to shelves in December. It lasted about as long as the second version deserved. Rondo was the soda that dared you to crush the can, and for a few years in the late 70s, people actually did. Schweppes launched it in 1978 as a lightly carbonated citrus drink under the slogan, Rondo, the Thirst Crusher. Less fizz meant you could chug it faster, and the commercials showed men slamming the stuff down and then crushing the bright yellow cans barehanded. Schweppes has backed the whole operation with a $9 million advertising budget in year 1. It was a staggering gamble for a company launching its first non-mixer soda in the American market. In Kansas City, Rondo reportedly outsold Coca-Cola in cans. But the distribution never stretched coast to coast. Momentum stalled by the early 80s, and Rondo vanished around 1983. It became so obscure that the 2006 film Idiocracy parodied it as Brondo, the Thirst Mutilator, and almost nobody in the theater caught the joke. Choc-ola had been around since 1944, which meant that by the 70s it was already a 30-year veteran of the soda wars and losing badly. The carbonated chocolate drink came in squat brown bottles and tasted like someone had shoved a malted milkshake through a carbonation machine. It was not cola, not root beer, not anything that fit neatly into the soda aisle, and that was both the draw and the fatal flaw. At drugstore lunch counters and small-town grocery stores, Choc-ola had its regulars, mostly kids who thought fizzy chocolate was the single greatest idea ever conceived. Adults were harder to convince. The brand never cracked a national footprint, and without coast-to-coast distribution, it was only a matter of time before someone bigger moved in. Yoo-hoo, which skipped the carbonation entirely and was far easier to mass-produce and ship, took over the chocolate drink market from sea to shining sea. By the late 70s, Choc-ola had retreated to a handful of markets. The brand technically still exists, but tracking down a bottle today requires the kind of effort most people reserve for missing persons. Like cola died twice, and both times it was someone else's fault. The original launched under the 7-Up company as a diet lemon-lime soda sweetened with cyclamate. When the FDA banned cyclamate in 1969, Like vanished along with dozens of other brands that depended on the sweetener. That should have been the end. But in 1982, new owners Philip Morris resurrected the name as a caffeine-free cola. a completely different product wearing a dead brand's clothes. They threw money at it: NASCAR sponsorships, television ads with Tim Conway, aggressive supermarket placement. The pitch targeted parents who wanted cola taste without the caffeine buzz keeping kids up past bedtime. It never caught on. Pepsi and Coke owned the shelf, and a caffeine-free option from a company known for cigarettes could not crack that hold. Like faded again by the early 1990s, and this time nobody brought it back.
If the name Quirst sounds like someone misspelled thirst on purpose, that is exactly what happened. RC Cola launched this lemon-lime soda with cartoon-heavy advertising aimed squarely at kids, and a sharp, tart flavor that set it apart from the smoother sweetness of 7-Up. The problem was standing out in a market that did not want you there. By the mid-70s, the lemon-lime shelf was a war zone. Sprite had Coca-Cola's muscle. 7-Up had decades of loyalty, and even Pepsi's Teem was struggling to hold its ground. Quirst had a clever name and a regional bottling network that could not match the national giants. It vanished so quietly that most soda historians cannot pin down the exact year it went away. No recall, no announcement, just a product that ran out of room and never came back. The man who created Whistle Orange Soda went on to invent one of the most famous drinks in history. He left Whistle behind like an old pair of shoes. Charles Leiper Grigg developed the orange soda in 1919 for the Vess Company in St. Louis. It sold well enough to earn him a promotion. But Grigg and Vess had a falling out, and when he walked away, Whistle stayed behind. Grigg then created 7-Up in 1929, a drink that would dominate the lemon-lime market worldwide. Whistle kept chugging along as a regional orange soda, even tangling with Coca-Cola in trademark disputes. By the 70s, Fanta, Sunkist, and Orange Crush, all backed by corporate empires, had carved up the market, and a St. Louis bottler could not hope to compete. Whistle faded from shelves and into collector circles where vintage bottles now command serious money. Chocolate Soldier was the soda that sounded like it belonged in a toy store and tasted like it might have come from one. The carbonated chocolate drink surfaced in the 70s as yet another attempt to prove fizzy chocolate could work as a beverage category. The first sip genuinely surprised people because the carbonation and the chocolate sweetness collided at angles your mouth did not expect. Some kids loved it. But novelty fades fast when the product sits next to Coke and Pepsi with 50 years of brand loyalty behind them. Chocolate Soldier could not hold shelf space, and it disappeared from coolers and vending machines without fanfare. The entire chocolate soda category never found its footing in America, a graveyard shared by Canfield's, Yoo-Hoo Soda, and a half-dozen others that tried the same trick and got the same result. Every diet soda you have ever opened exists because of a drink most people have never heard of. In 1952, a Brooklyn bottler named Hyman Kirsch created No Cal, not for dieters, but for diabetic patients at the Jewish Sanitarium for Chronic Disease. Kirsch used cyclamate, an artificial sweetener discovered in 1937 when a University of Illinois graduate student accidentally licked a lab compound and found it tasted sweet. No-Cal was a sugar-free ginger ale, functional and clinical, never meant to leave the hospital, but Dieters found it anyway. Actress Kim Novak signed on as spokesperson. By 1953, Kirsch was moving over 2 million cases in New York and Washington alone, pulling in more than $5 million a year. Canada Dre rushed out its own diet line, Glamour. Royal Crown followed with Diet Rite. Coca-Cola scrambled to build Tab. The entire diet soda industry traces straight back to a Brooklyn man trying to help sick people enjoy a fizzy drink. Most people remember Patio as the brand that became Diet Pepsi, but the name lived on for years in flavors nobody associates with dieting. After the cola version was rebranded in 1964, the Patio line kept selling orange, grape, and root beer through regional bottlers who had no reason to surrender a product that moved off shelves. These were full-sugar, full-flavor fruit sodas aimed at the same family market that bought RC Cola and Nehi. The advertising stayed modest, with local newspaper spreads and corner store displays, but the drinks had their loyalists. Patio Orange and Patio Grape held space in small market coolers through the early 70s. Then Pepsi consolidated. On-tap root beer replaced the Patio version in 1977, and the fruit flavors were simply phased out. By decade's end, the name existed only in the memories of long-time customers. In 1969, the federal government banned a single chemical and nearly destroyed an entire beverage category overnight. Cyclamate, the artificial sweetener in virtually every diet soda on the American market, was pulled after rat studies linked it to bladder cancer. The research was later found to be rodent-specific. It did not apply to humans. But the ban went through, and the fallout was brutal. Diet soda's market share plummeted from 20% to 3% almost instantly. Every brand that used cyclamate, including Diet Rite, Teem, No-Cal, Like, and Patio, had to reformulate or vanish. Most switched to saccharine, which tasted worse and carried its own health doubts. Some brands never recovered. Cyclamate remains banned in the United States to this day, cleared for use in over 50 other countries, but still illegal in the one where the diet soda revolution started. Coca-Cola's Chime arrived with a strategy meeting and departed with a shrug. The lightly carbonated fruit drink came in grapefruit and lemon lime, positioned as a sophisticated alternative to Sprite and Fresca, the kind of thing you might set out at a dinner party instead of cracking a can of cola. The branding was sleek. The fizz was deliberately gentle, and the marketing pitched refinement over refreshment, as though carbonation were a lifestyle choice rather than a beverage feature. Almost nobody bought it. American soda drinkers in the 70s did not want sophistication from a soft drink. They wanted cold, sweet, familiar, and cheap. A grapefruit beverage with upscale pretensions had no prayer at a gas station cooler next to a 35-cent Coke. Chime vanished so completely that it barely registers in soda databases. No cult following, no petition, just another line item in Coca-Cola's long catalog of boardroom favorites that died on contact with the real world.
Graf's Beverages of Milwaukee had been making soda since the 1870s, and their grapefruit and lime blend, simply called 50/50, was among the most quietly respected soft drinks in the Midwest. John Graf started the company as a small-batch carbonated beverage producer, and by the mid-20th century, Graf's was bottling not just its own brands, but also Dr. Pepper, RC Cola, and Schweppes under contract. 50/50 was the house star, tangy and citrus forward, balanced between the sourness of grapefruit and the snap of lime in a way that Squirt and Fresca never quite matched. Then the acquisitions came. Graf's was sold to P&V Atlas, then to Canada Dry in 1968. New ownership had no stake in a regional citrus soda with modest sales. Without a champion in the boardroom pushing distribution, 50/50 quietly slipped from the shelves where it had sat for decades. RC Cola never got the credit it deserved for being first at everything. Royal Crown was the first company to sell soda in a can in 1954. It was the first to offer a 16-ounce bottle, the first to launch a nationally marketed Diet Cola with Diet Rite, and the first to go caffeine-free with RC 100. Every time, Coca-Cola and Pepsi watched, copied the move, and buried RC with distribution and ad budgets that a Columbus, Georgia company could never hope to match. RC 100 was a textbook case of that pattern. The caffeine-free cola launched to capitalize on growing parental worry about what kids were drinking, and the name shouted its only selling point, 100% caffeine-free. The taste was decent. The concept was ahead of its time.
But when Coke and Pepsi released their own caffeine-free lines, backed by national television campaigns and coast-to-coast shelf placement, RC100 became invisible overnight. The soda that arrived first finished last, the same story Royal Crown had been living since the 1950s. In the early 1970s, Coca-Cola tried to stretch Teem into a whole family of diet sodas and watched every last one fail. 6 new flavors rolled out under the Tab name: root beer, lemon lime, ginger ale, black cherry, strawberry, and orange. All sugar-free, all sweetened with saccharine, which carried congressional cancer warnings on every can. The logic seemed bulletproof. Teem was the top diet brand in the country, and new flavors should have been easy growth. But diet drinkers in the 1970s were fiercely loyal to one taste, and that taste was Teem Cola. A root beer tabby confused people who associated the brand with a specific bitter-edged cola. By the end of the decade, every variant was dead. Only the original survived, carrying its warning label and its cult following into the 1980s, where Diet Coke was already waiting. The saccharine scare did not just hurt individual brands, it taught an entire generation to distrust the drinks they had been told were safe. After cyclamate was banned in 1969, the industry pivoted to saccharin as the only remaining approved artificial sweetener for food products. Then the studies hit. Research on rats linked saccharin to bladder cancer, and in 1977, Congress mandated that every product containing saccharin carry a label stating it had been shown to cause cancer in laboratory animals. TAB, Diet Rite, Diet Pepsi, every sugar-free soda on the shelf, all of them suddenly bore warnings that read like a Surgeon General's notice on a cigarette pack. Sales fell. Trust eroded. Entire brands lost their customer base, not because the product changed, but because the label did. It took until the year 2000 for the National Toxicology Program to delist saccharin as a carcinogen and for the warning labels to be repealed. By then, the damage was a quarter-century old. Canada Dry Spur was a cola that lived in the shadow of a ginger ale empire and never found its way out. Canada Dry launched it in the 1940s as a direct challenge to Coke and Pepsi, but the company's reputation was the problem. When people thought of Canada Dry, they thought of cocktail hour and tonic water, not cola. Spur could not escape that association, and by the late 50s, it had been pulled from shelves. In the early 80s, someone at corporate tried again with a low-caffeine reformulation, chasing the same health trend that RC100 was riding. The relaunch was brief and regional, a test market that never expanded beyond a handful of cities. Canada Dry went back to ginger ale, and Spur went back to being a footnote. Today, the brand exists only among vintage can collectors, where anything with the Canada Dry emblem on a cola commands a premium. Before Sprite existed, Coca-Cola tested a lemon-lime soda called Veep, and then erased it so thoroughly that most company historians have to dig through archives to confirm it was real. Coca-Cola produced 2 generations of Veep cans in 1961, running the drink through limited test markets to see whether the company could crack the citrus category that 7-Up had dominated for decades. The test results apparently confirmed the market was there, but did not justify keeping the Veep name or formula. Coca-Cola scrapped it around 1964 and launched Sprite instead, a brand that would eventually become one of the top-selling sodas on the planet. Veep vanished so completely that surviving cans are valued at over $1,000 in good condition, making them among the rarest Coca-Cola collectibles in existence. The company barely acknowledges Veep ever happened. The story of American diet soda is really the story of 4 sweeteners, each one replacing the last after a health scare that may or may not have been justified. Cyclamate launched the whole category and was banned in 1969 after rat studies. Saccharin replaced it and spent the 70s with a congressional cancer warning on every can. Aspartame arrived in 1981 under the NutraSweet brand and dominated for 2 decades, before a 1996 television report alleged links to brain tumors, sparking consumer backlash that pushed brands toward yet another replacement. Sucralose, sold as Splenda, stepped in next. Each transition killed brands that could not reformulate fast enough and alienated drinkers who swore every new version tasted worse than the last. Diet Rite was reformulated 4 separate times across 4 decades. Teem lost its loyal base when Coca-Cola swapped in aspartame in 1984. The diet soda you drink today tastes nothing like the one your parents drank, and the formula has never stopped changing because the sweetener has never stopped being under suspicion. Slice was supposed to fix everything Pepsi had gotten wrong with Teem, Aspen, and Patio, and for a moment it actually looked like it might. PepsiCo launched it in 1984 with a genuinely fresh hook, real fruit juice in a carbonated soda, starting at 10% juice content in the original lemon-lime formula. Orange, cherry, and apple flavors followed in 1986, and the orange variety became a legit hit, hypersweet, fizzy, and impossible to confuse with anything else in the cooler. But the juice content quietly shrank over the years as cost-cutting eroded what had made the brand special. By the 90s, Slice was just another artificially flavored soda wearing a name that no longer described what was inside the can. Pepsi replaced it with Sierra Mist in 2000, which itself was swapped for Starry in 2023. 3 different lemon-lime brands in 4 decades, each one erasing the last, and none of them as good as what Teem had been doing since 1960. Jolt Cola did not pretend to be healthy, did not chase the diet market, and did not care what your dentist thought. It launched in 1985 with a tagline that read like a dare: all the sugar and twice the caffeine. While every other company in America scrambled to offer low-calorie, caffeine-free, artificially sweetened alternatives, Jolt went the opposite direction: more of everything, no apologies. The bright red can became a symbol of late-night coding sessions, college cramming, and anyone who believed the rest of the soda aisle had gone soft. Jolt was the spiritual ancestor of Red Bull, Monster, and every energy drink that followed it onto the shelf. It proved there was a massive market for people who wanted their soda to hit harder, not lighter. The brand survived in various forms for over 3 decades before going under in 2019. By then, the energy drink category it had foreshadowed was worth more than $80 billion a year, and not 1 cent of it went to the company that had seen the future first. Every one of these was somebody's favorite until it was gone. Like, subscribe, and tell us which one you miss.